Let's start you off with your Nittany Lions. I am actually optimistic about them this year. I think they're the third best team in the Big Ten. I think with the new offensive coordinator, Drew Aller, will be better, and this team should be in a 12-team playoff. Just kind of give me your thoughts on Penn State entering this season.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, defensively, they're going to be as talented as before and probably as expected. I think the shift there at the coordinator position isn't going to be as seismic or have as much ripple effect as potentially on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that's where the focus is right now is how can Andy Koltanecki come in there, identify playmakers. I know a lot of people talked about the wide receiver room last year and the lack of production. I think it's just more so of a mindset. When you recruit at the level that Penn State's recruited at, you have guys in there who can win. It's just about putting them in situations time and again to win in advantageous matchups. So I really think the ceiling is dependent on how Andy Koltanecki can bring Drew Aller along in his development. I typed up a long thing. I think it's a little bit of leadership, but it's not really like vocal leadership or even actionable leadership. I think it's timeliness with his plays and big plays and explosive plays, and then subsequently having a grasp on the offense to a nature where he can be an extension of Andy on the field and get it rolling.
You know, what advice would you give him? Because this time last year, people were like, oh, watch out for Drew Aller. He's going to be great. And now people have their doubts about what Drew Aller could be at the college level.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's so tough because I think his skill set is something I can relate to. And I think the transition of college football as a whole has gone much more to kind of a different skill set, if that makes sense. And for Drew, I think it's really lean into what he does well. He's a great thrower of the football. Every report I'm getting from my contacts inside are that he's extremely cerebral. He understands the game. He understands the offense. He wants to learn more about that. And I find that is a little bit of a dying process, if that makes sense. Being able to get in and out of plays, being able to not waste plays. You know, you hear Tom Brady talk about it a lot, like just not wasting plays. And I think for him, really leaning into what he does well and what can be a separator. It may not be the fact that he's going to run around and make plays like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, but finding those attributes outside of just throwing the football that he can really lean into, develop, and become an asset for the team, and then ultimately for him as he moves forward throughout his career.
We know they have the running backs this year. What's your evaluation of the line? And I know they brought in Fleming from Ohio State. If he could stay healthy, he's supposed to be a productive player, obviously. But how about the line and the wide receivers for Penn State this year, in your opinion?
Yeah, I've been hearing some good things from camp about the wide receiver group. You know, obviously, I think they're still going to be able to run the football. They were physical at the line of scrimmage. They didn't have as many explosives last year, but they were still really efficient. The Cooper Cousins kid, I think is his name. He's a physical specimen, and the reports coming out for what he's been doing in training camp has been fantastic. So offensive line, I expect that to continue to get to where I think everybody wants it. It's been a slow build. The room that I'm really excited about, though, and especially for Koltanecki and his track record at Kansas, has just been about, again, putting guys in situations to be successful and taking advantage of what he has within his tool set to expose defenses. And I think they might have one of the best tight end rooms in the country, depth wise. I think they're more of the X factor, like figuring out creative ways to find mismatches with those guys. They're big targets. They're athletic. They've been reliable. They have a proven one in Tyler Warren, who I think is going to be a very high draft pick this year coming out. But being able to get creative with that, being able to get creative with the personnel, being able to, again, be an offensive-minded team and create those mismatches and actually attack with what you have. And I think they have a plethora of weapons. Might not be the traditional Marvin Harrison burner that's going to go have 15 catches a game and be a difference maker, but I think that there's a way to kind of do that with mass and volume.
Christian Hackenberg here with us. I look at the schedule outside Ohio State. You know, I don't look at a game and say, oh, I don't think they're going to find the way to get it done. Like West Virginia's a tough team, and they got two good running backs. I like their quarterback. Neil Brown has that team now moving the right direction. We'll see what USC is like in the Big Ten. You'd imagine Fickle, takes a step here in year two at Wisconsin. But this is a schedule where Franklin doesn't make the playoff. I really don't know, Christian, then how you justify keeping him as the head coach. Do you share that sentiment as well? If they don't make the playoffs this year, then you get rid of Franklin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say I share the sentiment, but I think that's definitely a topic of conversation, right? There's a point where you need to continue to take steps in the right direction and build, and I think you bring up a great one in the fact that this schedule this year really bodes well for all of the pieces to come together. The stuff that he's been preaching to the fans, the stuff that he's been preaching inside the building, the schedule bodes well, and the expectations there. You saw it last year, though. The pressure's there as well, and I think he's going to. I don't think he's ignorant to it. I think he understands it. I think the athletic administration from Pat Kraft down also understand it. So there's excitement, but it's a results-based business, man. At the end of the day, you have to go out there and continue to take steps forward and continue to put yourself in a position where you can be as competitive as possible, top down. He's done a lot of that on the back end stuff with the recruiting and the facilities and just the overall PR and marketing of the program. But if there's any year, it feels like I've been saying this for the past few years, but if there's any year where he really has to turn the corner, because I think fans are at that point where it can cause a lot of disruption for the program moving forward. This is a gotta have it year.
Talking to Christian Hackenberg right now. It's also you got to have it year for Ohio State. Now, there's different expectations. It's to not only beat Michigan, which they haven't done the last 3 years, but it's to go win a national championship. The conversation with Ryan Day, I think, is a fascinating one because he's only lost 8 games in his career, but you know these rivalry games, you don't beat your rival. The fan base doesn't care if you've only lost 8 games when 3 of those losses come to Michigan. If they can't beat them now, it's that feeling of when are you going to be able to beat them, especially with all the changes that Michigan's had, Christian.
And what's really interesting is he inherited one hell of a run on the Ohio State side as well. I think it was, 10 or 11 years in a row where Ohio State had won. I think he was a part of a few of those early on. But, that comes with wearing the scarlet and gray, man. That game truly just getting to know some guys who played at Ohio State, and I'm sure the sentiments shared with guys at Michigan. Like, that game is slightly different. I would say it's probably, I'm just a big Army Navy guy personally, but like I would assume that the type of focus and commitment to that game is on par with that. And it's interesting because you said he's produced draft picks. He's won a lot of football games. He's been really competitive in the playoff in games where they may have been written off. The Georgia game, I thought had every opportunity to win that one when Georgia ended up winning the national championship. It's just, this one seems to be his monkey on his back. And I agree with you. I think he has to change the narrative this year.
We know the changes in the Big Ten with the Pac-12 schools coming over. Out of those Pac-12 schools that came over, Oregon has the highest expectations. Lanning's a heck of a coach, even though they lost to Washington twice last year. And they bring in Dylan Gabriel, who was further ahead of Bo Nix when Bo Nix got to Eugene 2 years ago with Gabriel's college success. Do you think, people look at Oregon, they're the 3rd or 4th best team in the country, depending on who you talk to. Do you think maybe with the unknown about how they're going to be in the Big Ten that maybe expectations are a tad too high for the Ducks this year?
I don't think so. I think the natural evolution and the way that Lanning has approached building that program has been fantastic. I have a ton of respect for the way that he does things. He obviously has had some great mentors in his past with Saban and then Kirby at Georgia. Two of the guys that have built dynasties in the modern era. I think he's embracing it, and I think you ultimately have to embrace that as you're building those expectations, the goals. He just got an open check from Phil Knight, so he's going to continue to battle there, and that always helps. So, I don't think the expectations are unrealistic. I think his mentality will fit into the Big Ten play probably more than the traditional Pac-12 schools, just in terms of physicality and a defensive focus. So being able to land a guy like Gabriel to run the offensive side, he's played a lot of football, helps smooth things out. And I think they're going to be the quickest to transition to this style of play and the environments and the expectations. And obviously I think probably the scariest for the Michigans and the Ohio States of the world who've ran the Big Ten for the past 15 years.
Yeah, I'll be very curious also, Christian Hackenberg, to see what Michigan is this year. Defensively, we know they got Will Johnson and Graham, and they're going to be phenomenal defensively. It's on offense. Like, Donovan Edwards had a great national championship game. He wasn't good, though, last year. He's much better 2 years ago, so I expect a bounce-back year from him. But the big question is Alex Orji at quarterback, because he's an athletic freak, but it's can you put it together? And I think it's like low-hanging fruit, but there's some similarities to Alabama last year with Jalen Milroe, got off to a rocky start and then came on strong at the end of the year. So I'm fascinated to see what Alex Orji brings to Michigan now, most likely being the guy to replace J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah, what I'll tell you is I think the one thing I give Michigan a ton of credit is they've kind of gone old school and they've just sown the toughness and owning the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football into the fabric of their program. And as a quarterback, that takes a ton of pressure off of you. I mean, I think it's low-hanging fruit as well, but you look at the Penn State game. I mean, JJ I think he threw the ball 8 times. He made a couple plays with his legs, but they proceeded to run the football 32 or 34 times in a row and just beat the hell out of us. And if you're able to do that, football becomes a pretty simple game. You know what I mean? You get 3.5 yards in a cloud of dust, move the sticks, keep the time of possession, score touchdowns, don't kick field goals, and you're going to win a lot of football games. So I think when you're grooming a quarterback into that type of environment, it's a lot easier to hide the inefficiencies and inadequacies of their play, lean on the run game, and allow them to develop and get in a rhythm throughout the season. So ultimately, whoever it is, I think Alex Orji is probably the most dynamic in terms of tool set because the legs complement the running back and the running back focused run game. And obviously we've seen a little bit of it. I mean, the kid's got an absolute hose, just being able to pick and choose when you can use it and how it best fits within the scheme.
We got the news today that J.J. McCarthy is out for the season with the Minnesota Vikings. So we won't see him until next year. There was a big debate, though, going back to the draft on what J.J. McCarthy can be. With what you've seen or what you think he can eventually become, what do you think J.J. McCarthy is as a pro quarterback?
I just think it's really interesting, man. I think what he was asked to do at the college level in terms of breadth and depth of like winning football games, I feel like the transition to the NFL game, like you can't hide that anymore. You have to be able to do it consistently. And I'm not saying he can't. He's been a winner and he's made key plays in a lot of those games, whether it be with his legs or his arm. But really, when you look at the NFL level, you need to be able to just backpack that sucker and go. And the guys that are really successful can do that. I just haven't seen a large enough sample size of him doing that. And I think I always like to give guys the benefit of the doubt. And I think, unfortunately, he's going to have to sit through this rookie year. But, we'll find out. I know it's kind of a lame answer, but that's what I got.
Yeah, last one for you, Christian Hackenberg. Nebraska is dying to just see a football team get to a bowl game again. They were close last year, had 5 wins. Nebraska's going to be good in the trenches, but now they have the quarterback in Dylan Raiola, who I'd be shocked if he's not starting week 1. And you're already getting the comparisons to Patrick Mahomes, and you know what the hype train can be. Like, what do you kind of expect out of Dylan Raiola with what you know about him?
Yeah, I think he's a phenomenal talent. The comparisons I think are warranted. He trains with Jeff Christensen. Jeff Christensen's Pat's guy. You see it in his feet. You see it almost in the way he releases the football, and he's obviously uber talented from the spring game. What I'm just really curious to see is how Rule takes the next step. I'm a big believer in Matt Rule. I think he expects a lot out of that program, and I think a lot of the things that cost them football games during that last season under Frost were just it was all mental. It was all between the ears. It was all execution. It's taking practice to the game, and I think with a quarterback like that, if he's bought in 100% to the process that Rule has throughout the building, he starts playing well, everybody follows. Doesn't matter if he's a freshman or not. You earn your stripes between the lines. It makes it a lot easier to bring everyone else along with you.
It could kind of be a little like C.J. Stroud-esque with what he did to the Texans, and that could change very quickly overnight.
Correct.